ClickMeeting, I wanted to love you. I really thought we could make this work. And this is an example of why it's so important to do real testing. But before I get ahead of myself, this is my ClickMeeting review. It's a webinar platform, and I'm reviewing it because I'm testing every webinar platform I can get my hands on. I've been using GoToWebinar since forever, and I'm looking for something better. And at first, I really thought ClickMeeting would be the one. Hello, I'm Shane Malach from activegrowth.com, and let's go have a look at what ClickMeeting is actually like. And I'm going to run you through what I found in my test, and I'm going to show you the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's get started with what's good. When you create an event in ClickMeeting, it's got a good UI, everything here makes sense, and it's easy to create your event, customize your different pages that people will see when they sign up, and when they enter the webinar, you have branding and appearance settings. And all of this is good, makes sense, easy to use. ClickMeeting is suitable for webinars as well as meetings and coaching and things like that. You can even have a permanent room that is open for things like coaching sessions, and you can start an ad hoc meeting where you just basically launch right into a meeting. Great. When you create an event, one of the options is to create a paid event, which simply connects to PayPal so you can get payments directly through ClickMeeting. Also great feature. In ClickMeeting, you can also run automated webinars, and you have various options for both what the webinar is like in terms of interactions and things during the event, and in terms of the scheduling. So you can have a single automated webinar, or you can create a repeating schedule. There's a lot of flexibility here. Great. There's also a neat builder here where you can basically build the timeline of what your recorded webinar will show. And you can, for example, enter or add previously created webinar. So this is a previous live webinar, and I can use this as the content in the auto webinar. I can also add further files, so I can even stitch together several videos to create the content for my auto webinar. And you can add calls to action at certain times. The call to action or call to actions you create appear here, and so you can place them on the timeline so you can really time them to appear exactly when your sales pitch happens, for example, in a sales webinar. Excellent. Then once we enter the actual meeting room as an admin, you've got excellent options. This is an excellent meeting room. Right here on the side, you can see all the stuff you can do. So let's get started setting some of this up. So right here, I have my webcam active. I can switch that to be the main thing on screen, and I can also switch back to sharing something else. And we have surveys, questions, and we even have a whiteboard, which can be really helpful. So if you want to illustrate stuff, explain stuff in writing and sketches during your presentation, this is great. And it's easy to switch back and forth between different views. This is all really good. Now let's join this webinar. We'll pretend to be an attendee in this different browser here. I get a link, and this sends me to the sign up page. And here I can sign up. And then strangely, the event itself opens in a different window. I'm not sure why that is. It's slightly confusing, but okay. Now, here is what happens. So here we have the waiting room. And here's what happens when, as an admin, I start the event. Start the event. And then, as a visitor, as an attendee, I have a very similar view where I have various things such as the main screen, and on the sidebar, I have my chat area. And there can even be an attendee view, although I can turn that off if I don't want to have an attendee list. So this would be more for a meeting. If I don't want this, I can disable this here as an admin, and then we only have chat on the side. Now, if I switch as the admin, if I switch to the whiteboard, here's what happens. For the viewers, they will, similarly to me, they will basically see the main screen with the screen sharing or whiteboard, and they will see the webcam in the top right corner. Now here's something that is good, but also not so good. We have a chat function. So as a visitor, I'm going to say hello here, and that shows up for the admin as well. And you can pin messages as an admin. And there are various options as a visitor where I can raise my hand, or I can just signal agreement or disagreement and things like that without having to type anything. This is pretty good. One thing that isn't so great is that as an admin, I have to go and enable the questions and answers functionality by switching into this tab here once, and then I can switch back to something else. And what this does is now there is a new interface for visitors where they can mark a message as a question. I can go, this is a question. And questions are highlighted in a different way with this blue border for the host. And if I go back here, I can select a question and display that. And this will show for everyone. So I can see this is the question, everyone has that on screen, and I can address that question. This is a great feature. It would just be nice if it was a bit more intuitive to get to the point where people can submit these questions. We also have the option to add polls and surveys. So if I display this, as an admin, I can see the results come in. As a visitor, here are examples of the different questions you can have. You can have a single poll, you can have a poll with multiple different types of questions, and you can fill them out like this and submit this. And as an admin, you can then share the results. So I can say end voting, share results, and then everybody sees this on screen. Now, the great thing about this is that the questions and the polls and surveys and things will also show up in the replay. And this is very important because otherwise, if you use these features a lot in your live webinar and then people watch the replay, but this doesn't show up, which is the case in most other tools I've tested, it's just weird because you have a video of someone going, oh, you know, here are the poll results, but you don't see anything. Or here's the question I'm answering, but you don't see anything. So it's pretty awkward. ClickMeeting does this right. But unfortunately, it's not all good with ClickMeeting. So here is the bad. First of all, the replay you get from an event is pretty weak. It's just a video. It just plays on a simple page with a video. There's no like simulated replay features or interaction features or anything like that in a replay. You can, instead of creating a replay, you can create an automated webinar, which will then have more of these features again, but it's not very convenient. So you just have to be aware that you have all this stuff that's great in the main event, but when people watch the replay, they just get a video. Another thing that's strange is that if you choose to record, you can choose what to record, and you can just record the presentation or the presentation with a video overlay, which makes sense so you can have the presentation and live video, but you won't see this. You won't see what this actually looks like. So in reality, it'll look something like this, where the webcam overlays your screen share or your presentation slides, but you don't really have a good preview to see how much of the space it takes up. So I ended up with a replay where this video was covering some important information on my slides, and I didn't really have any way to know that in advance. But once the replay is done, it's too late. Another thing is that with all these features, it does tend to get a bit messy. So even for the visitor, if there's a lot of chat happening here, there's stuff happening here, there's stuff happening here in the video, it's pretty messy. It's a bit chaotic, and that's just something you have to be aware of. You also can't hide the chat interface. You can't do a webinar where there's just no chat interface. You can have a chat interface with a message that says chat is closed, but that's not the same as like a cleaner, more focused presentation. Not great. And then the thing about the questions and answers, a feature that I generally love, but the way in which you have to tell people, look, here's the difference between a chat and a question, and here's how to submit a question and so on, takes some time for people to get used to. Not great. Now, all this would just be nitpicking, but unfortunately, that's not where it ends. Here comes the ugly. Screen sharing. This is where the problem starts. If I choose to share my screen right here, then you'll see that it opens, you have to download an app and it opens this app. Now, most webinar solutions that are web-based will just use Chrome's built-in screen sharing tool. This one doesn't. Why not? I don't know. As you can see, we have an app here which messes up the interface quite a bit. It's just floating on top of other stuff. I can choose to share an application. I'm going to share my About page here as usual. And this then eventually does show up for your visitors, for your viewers. Now, why am I listing this as the ugly? Well, it's because screen sharing was an absolute disaster when I tested this. And this also shows why it's important to really test this with a real crowd of people. I was doing a webinar to about 100 people, and screen sharing simply didn't work. Now, when I do a test like this, what I'm looking at right now is I'm sharing the screen here. Here, I'm a simulated visitor. It's working. Doesn't seem to be any problem. But once this room was full of people, this completely broke down. I kept getting, on my end, it looked like half the screen was just blanking out, or it was just glitching out. And for my attendees, it was as bad or possibly even worse. The chat was just full of people complaining that they couldn't see anything, or they couldn't see half of it, or it kept glitching out, or it kept going to black. And a lot of people just left because it was pointless. They just couldn't get it to work. People tried refreshing. And basically, probably about 50% of my chat was just people saying, this doesn't work. I gotta go now. I did try to work around this problem any way I could. I tried all the different sharing options, you know, sharing an entire screen, sharing an application window, sharing just a region on the screen. I tried restarting it several times, and it just didn't work. And because it was so difficult and so much of my time on the webinar was spent trying to troubleshoot this problem and communicating with my attendees about what to do, I couldn't use the recording of the webinar either, because nobody wants to watch a webinar recording in which so much time is spent kind of talking about technical issues. Now, in the recording itself, the file turned out fine, so I can't actually show you an example of what this looked like. But needless to say, during the live event, when arguably it matters most, this was simply not working. So with that said, let's briefly talk about pricing anyway, before I get to my conclusion on ClickMeeting. So on ClickMeeting, we have pricing that starts at a room limited to 25 people for $30 a month, which that doesn't make any sense. I think a 25-seat room for $30 is just not a good deal. It's more than $1 per person per month that can join any of your events. That makes no sense to me. I don't know why this exists. 50, I think, is a good minimum, costs $39 a month. That makes more sense. And then if you want proper webinars, 100 attendees will cost you $80 a month. And the next step up is 500 for $180 a month. Now, overall, I think the pricing here is good. I think it's a good deal. A webinar room with all these features and automated webinars and so on for $80 a month, that is a good deal. But there should be a tier between 100 and 500, because 100 it's easy. It's kind of easy to fill up a room with 100 people, but 500, that's a stretch. And so I think a lot of people will have to pay that extra $100 a month, even though maybe they only need like 20 to 50 extra seats. Not ideal. But overall, the pricing is fair compared to the competition. So what's the conclusion about ClickMeeting as a webinar solution? Well, the problem is the issue I had with the screen sharing. The technical issue there is an absolute deal breaker. Everything else in ClickMeeting is so good. I really think that, it has some of the best features. It has a great interface. It has so many good things going for it. But for a webinar software, this kind of technical problem is just 100% a deal breaker. Because if you do this, if you're trying to do a sales webinar, and on a sales webinar, you might be in a position where delivering a good webinar makes a difference between earning or not earning thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. You cannot have a piece of software that will just not share your screen properly. And then what? You can't do your presentation and you have to try and sell your thing without your presentation. It's just a total deal breaker. And even during my event, which wasn't a sales event or anything like that, it wasn't a super important event, but even there, I wonder how many attendees I lost just because of technical issues. And anyone who joined there and had to deal with all these issues is unlikely to join my next webinar, because they'll just remember, oh, last time sucked, and they're not going to come back. So this is basically, no matter how great all the other features are, no matter how good the price is, nothing else matters. If this doesn't work, you cannot use this solution. Look, if a ClickMeeting representative was here, they'd probably say, oh, this was a one-time thing, or it usually doesn't happen, or it was my fault, or whatever. But here's the thing, right? I've done hundreds of webinars on GoToWebinar, and there it doesn't happen. And here I did one, and it did happen. And so it's also going to take a lot for me to kind of trust this and come back and try this again. But I'd really like to. I think with the feature sets they have, and if they just did a bit more polishing, and with the pricing, ClickMeeting could be the best product in the field. But because of the issues I found, it's 100% not recommended. All right, so that's my take on ClickMeeting. Check the text and description below this video to see if I've gone through all of the webinar reviews yet, because once I've done that, I'm going to do a big roundup review and pick a winner. In the meantime, let me know what you think of this video, and let me know if you have experience with good or bad webinar software yourself. Go ahead and leave a comment below.